Matt Kruger from the Center for Writing and Rhetoric, and he's going to talk to us about teaching writing in EDHE 105 and 305. And Karen Pritchett, sorry. Didn't know if y'all are both doing it together today or not. So thank y'all for being here, and appreciate y'all taking time to do that. Do y'all need anything before?
We'll put a PowerPoint.
Okay. Good.
See y'all later. Thanks again.
Thanks.
I don't know if I know how to use that. Can I actually move
There
that?
are some more boxes
Yep.
down here.
And you, all you have to do is hit that.
Enjoyed your first one so much. Have a second.
Does it work
There's
every
also
time?
drinks.
Does it work every time?
It does, every time. Or it has this morning, so when I tested it. All right, I'll leave you alone.
All right,
Thank you. All good.
Good afternoon, everyone. How y'all doing? My name's Guy Krieger. I'm a lecturer in the Department of Writing and Rhetoric and the chair of Writing 101. My colleague Karen Forget is the chair of Writing 100. Those classes are essentially the same thing. They're just they're different student enrollment numbers. We cap Writing 100 sections at 15 and Writing 101 sections at 21. Writing 100 requires more conferencing. The reason I say that is because we work together on curriculum. Those students are doing the same things. And I consider those courses, Writing 100 and 101, essential to the student experience here at Ole Miss. And I consider your course that you're teaching right there with it. And I see a lot of similarities. I worked together with Dewey and his folks for several years because the EDHE courses are really hotbeds for writing, critical thinking, reflecting, the kind of things that we do in our courses too. And so we're going to talk to you a little bit about writing in EDHE courses today. Provost Wilken set me up nicely with the information he presented, talking a little bit about what you all do and what the function of EDHE on this campus is. And this slide here hits some of those bullet points that he covered. EDHE helps first-year students adjust to the university, to develop a better understanding of the learning process, acquire essential survival skills, enhance academic skills, begin the major career exploration process, which is a big thing, understand the mission, values, and constituencies of a comprehensive public university, and as he pointed out, in particular our public university, which is unique in some ways. Much like what he said, I've been to many other campuses, and this campus does have an interesting, unique feel to it, and our students know that. And deal with the ethical and social concerns that they may face as a member of this community. And why we bring these bullet points up here is to juxtapose them with reflective writing. And we're going to talk about reflective writing today and what it does. And in these bullet points, I won't read those over word for word as I did on the left side. But you can see here, reflective writing, your response to experiences, opinions, events, new information. I'll let you read through the rest of that. But I think you can see what reflective writing does. It starts to let students make meaning of these experiences and these changes that they're going through. The previous speaker talked a little bit about the transition from high school to college, and one of the major differences I see every year, and you'll probably see that too, or have seen it, is that so much of K through 12 is testing. You kind of regurgitate what you know, show these things in these testing formats. It's not a criticism of what they're doing. There's different expertise there. But college becomes so much about the bigger picture. So what? What does this mean? Even if you can answer something correctly on a test, well, what does that knowledge do for you? You know, that kind of thinking. And so reflective writing, which we use in Writing 100 and 101, and which you use in EDHE, allows students the vehicle to really start to make meaning and think about these bigger picture issues. So I'm going to ask you all to do some reflection as we get going here. So we have a longer slot than the previous ones. I envy those people who get up there with 10-minute quick bursts and they get out of here. We're going to be here with you for a little bit, so we're going to be a little more interactive. So I'm going to ask you all to do a little bit of reflecting. I think most of y'all have something to write with and write on, right? Are we good there? Okay, good. So if you look at the slide up there, hopefully everybody can see that, and if not, let me know and I'll bring you a copy of it. But if you have taught EDHE before, why did you agree to teach it again? What did you learn from it? What do you hope to learn this year? In what ways does teaching EDHE affect your other work at the university? And if you're new to teaching EDHE, why did you agree to teach it this time? What experiences do you think you will bring to it? What do you hope to learn from it? And in what ways do you think teaching EDHE will affect your other work at the university? So either way, whichever category you fall into, I want you to respond to that. So just take 5 minutes or so and write down some responses to that, and we'll talk a little bit about that. If you're new to teaching, I just introduced you to trick number one in the classroom, too, is have students write about it. You want to get some discussion, some good thinking going, have them write a little bit about it. So that will, I used to have a teacher who would ask gigantic questions, like, what do you think about World War II? A lot. I don't know if I'm ready to talk about it yet. So those kind of things you want to write a little bit about, and that gets your thinking going and gets discussion going. So let's discuss this. You hear from a teacher. How many of you have taught EDHE before? Okay, so this is a room of a lot of veterans. Good. So let's hear from a couple of people who have taught before. How did you respond to this? Go ahead.
I want to improve for my first year. In my first year, I realized that I didn't know as much as I thought I did. So I plan to be more structured and follow the text a little more closely. And then as far as how does it affect my work at university, it allows me to remember what it was like to be a new student on a college campus.
Good.
And keeps me in touch with the undergraduate experience and the unique and evolving needs of college students.
Great, yeah. So what's interesting, that second part of the answer is great too, and hopefully the experience of teaching should be so humbling, even for people who've taught for so long, that it should help us remember what it's like to be a student. But that first part too sounds like the response of the student too, which is great. I want to get better. I want to learn and get better. Good answer. Anybody else who has taught before? Yeah.
I teach because I love guiding students through the intricate maze of freshman year. I learn so much from them and their perspectives on life, in school, etc. And EDHE allows me to build a better relationship with my students, and I find that most of them continue to come to me throughout their entire time in college.
Good, too. I like the long-term stuff. But one of the things you said too is that idea of learning from them, which is so great, and it's so foreign to them at first. Many of them, not all of them, to think that that learning is this social act, and we all share in it, and it doesn't need to be it's not I have all the knowledge and let me give you that knowledge. It's we learn together too. So
I was going to say they remind me of how old I am as well. Analogies just don't hit home like they used to.
I had a student last semester say, we were reading an article, and the person in the article was 30 years old, and she referred to the person in the article as middle-aged, and I said, oh, that's so bad. What about those of you new to teaching EDHE? Can I hear from somebody there? Yeah.
I put that I begun working toward my PhD and realized I had absolutely no experience teaching in the classroom, and I wanted to gain some valuable experience in teaching.
Great.
As far as what experience do I hope to bring to it, I was a transfer student from a junior college. I'm teaching to 305.
Oh.
I hope to be able to provide some of the experiences that I went through as a junior college transfer to junior college students.
Great. That's good.
They're going through that process as well.
Hear this thread of empathy too, which is really good. So, and we've got to cover a bunch of material. So, I'd like to hear a lot of responses, but we'll move along with this. But that you kind of see this thread of what reflection, what writing allows you to do, and we're going to talk about how to push students into this bigger picture type of thinking. You will, no doubt, those of you who've taught before know this. You will get students who see writing as this task, and jump through this hoop, just produce something, get it, turn it in, get it out of the way. When in reality, what we're asking them to do goes far beyond just turning something in to be corrected for grammar or something like that. We're asking them to make meaning of their experiences and their thinking in a very pivotal, transformative. We hope 4 years, as Noel pointed out. It might be more than that, but we hope 4 or 5 years. And so, like I said earlier, reflection is this vehicle to really get them into this space. And writing can be a very valuable part of your course. I'm going to turn it over to Karen, and we're going to talk about some of the ways we get there. The why, what, and how. And we've got a nice quote from Albert Einstein, so he's always a good person to quote.
Well, they're not always successful as a student.
That's
so.
true, that's true.
When we asked you to write a little bit, did any of you guys get a little nervous? I do. Did any of you guys feel like that was a long 5 minutes?
Not unless you said you were gonna take it up.
That's what you recognized. Yeah. Well, and that wasn't even really 5 minutes, that was really just 4 minutes. To me, that, even now, and I've been teaching writing for 20 years, that I still get very nervous when someone asks me or pays me to write something. And I still get really nervous in terms of time. It always feels long to me. And I'm always so glad when it is over. So what I thought we might talk a little bit about today is confronting that in your students, because your students will feel that too. That is just the way writing works. It's a skill. Anytime you're asked to demonstrate a skill, that competitive part of you comes up and it says, I better get to do this pretty well. So how do we open this up for students so that they not only understand that they need to excel at it, but also why and how? So before you make any kind of writing assignment with your students, the first thing you want to do is you want to explain to them why they are doing that. And the assignments that you do that are writing assignments all are reflective assignments. So it's important to understand why, as people who are becoming college-educated individuals, it's important for them to reflect. So it's kind of what we use with our students when we talk about reflective writing is we say, look, it's going to help you better understand yourself. Generally, we say in our writing classes, you understand yourself as a writer and as a learner. And certainly that applies to your course as well, but even more so to your course trying to understand themselves as college students and what it means to become college educated, and also what their college experience means. Okay? That's what we really talk about when we talk about reflection. And it's important that we tell our students that, because reflection is going to be new to them. It's not something that we typically ask high school students to do. It's a much bigger thing than we usually ask high school students to do, and there's not usually a vehicle for doing it in high school as well. So it's really important when you start one of these assignments to say, here's why we reflect in college. And in this PowerPoint, which you guys will have access to through Blackboard too, if you're looking for language to help you with that as you're putting assignments together, we offer some language there for you for the personal journal entries that the students turn in, as well as the reflective responses. So that's the first thing you want to do. You want to explain why. Second thing you want to do is you want to explain what it is, right? So, okay, I got why we're supposed to do it. What the heck is it? And this is kind of the standard definition whenever you look for things about reflective writing that is offered. It's talking about looking at things in a larger context, looking at the implications of things, looking at the meaning of things. So, John Dewey, that famous quote from Dewey, we don't learn from doing, we learn from reflecting on it, right? Thinking about it, what it meant, right? What did that experience mean for me? So you want to make sure that you explain what reflection is, that idea of thinking about something, not for what it was, but in the larger context of your college experience. And again, if you're looking for some language to use with your students, this PowerPoint embeds just a couple of, like little paragraphs you can pop in there. So that you can say, student says, I don't quite get what reflective language is. Well, maybe this language will help them understand that. So explain why, explain what, and then finally, you want to explain how. Now, it seems like it should be really basic that students would come to college understanding how to read an assignment sheet, but they don't, right? Mostly because we ask them to do different things in college than they've been asked to do before. So these are some of the things that you want to keep in mind when you assign a piece of writing to a student, things that you want to help them understand. So you want to help them understand to whom they're writing, right? And that can differ depending on your assignment. Generally, for your pieces, for reflective pieces, the student will be writing to you as the instructor, but also to himself or herself, right? Talking him or herself through his experience. You want to give them a little sense of what the process is like. What do you do first? What do you do second? What do you do third? You want to give them, if you have things that are off the table that you do not want them to write about at all, you need to let them know that. Or if you have things that you definitely want them to write about, you want to let them know that as well. You want to give them a sense of the length. And you can do it in words. I like words well, it's easy now with computers, right? This counts it up for you. And pages can be manipulated so much, so I tend to do words, but you can do pages if you wanted to. You want to give them a sense of a format, what's it supposed to look like? Do you want a header on the piece? Do you want a title on the piece? Do you want it to be double-spaced? Can it be handwritten? All that kind of stuff. You want to tell them when it's due, how to submit it, and then also you want to give them a sense of how it's going to be graded. It's an important thing for students to know before they undertake it, right? What are the big things that you're looking for? So I think the next slide
This is a sample of kind of all of that put
gives you
together.
a sample of that. So if you kind of pull all those things together, why am I doing something, what am I doing, and how am I doing it? You might have an assignment sheet that looks like this. You might say, here's why you're writing the paper, here's what you're supposed to be writing about, here's who your audience is, here's a little bit of the process, you know, for those event papers when they have to go out and reflect. Go to the event, think about it beforehand, make notes, write a draft, put it aside, reread it. If you want revised writing, you need to ask for revised writing. You know, if you don't want them to turn in the first thing they have drafted, you need to tell them, you know, draft it, put it aside, then come back and fix it, right? And then any of the specific requirements that you want to have for that paper, put at the bottom as well. Right? And it's so good to have it on the assignment sheet because students will have questions, and particularly if they'll say things like, well, I didn't know that it was supposed to be this length. If you have it on the assignment sheet, you can always point back to it, right, and say, maybe you forgot, but it pretty clearly says on the assignment sheet, that's what you're supposed to do, okay? So the more sort of nuts and bolts that you can be, and the more you can walk it through, the more it'll pay off for them in the long run, and it makes your life easier as well.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I mean, in so many ways, students they've been asked to show that they've done something, to provide proof that they've done something, you know, and the last speaker pointed out that, you know, one student is graded by how much they accomplished and so forth, and so it's not to say that sounded like obviously an extreme example, but you know, students, I've read some of the work you look at from the students, some of these reflective responses, and a lot of times it looks like students are trying to prove, look, I was at this event here, I went. And, you know, in college, we expect you to go. I mean, that's the bare minimum expectation. And this reflective writing should get into, okay, so what came of that? How was that interesting or impactful? How does that blend in with your worldview so far in life, or how does that change or impact your worldview? You know, as Julia pointed out earlier, talking about the Ford Center, it's interesting to hear students go experience something that they had never experienced before. And a lot of the events we asked them to attend, from sports, athletic events to speeches to plays, productions, those kind of things are going to be very new to them, or at least done in new ways. And that's what these, helping them kind of think about that stuff before you do, you know, before they go right, will be very helpful. I tell teachers, we do teacher training in our department, and I tell teachers a lot of times, especially new teachers, you get what you ask for. And if you're very open and vague in what you're asking for, be prepared to see those things back. So.
But you might say them anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
So what we want to do next, and Guy's going to lead us through this, is we want to show you some samples of reflective responses that have come in from EDHE students, and talk you through some ways to think about responding to them. So once you know you gave them a great assignment, told them what they needed to know, you send them out, they're hopefully done what they're supposed to do, and it comes back, and then you get it, so now what do you do with it? That's kind of where we're going.
Yeah, so I'm going to put up an example of a short reflective response from a student, an EDHE student, and ask you to do a little interactive exercise here. And this one, feel free to talk to a neighbor too, because what I'd like you to do, can everybody see that? First of all, everybody can read that? Okay, good. So I want you to read that over. And I want us to kind of pretend that this is a class activity. So that this is a student who is in the class and has drafted a reflective response from an event, in this case Rebel Run. And I want you to take a few minutes and talk about how you might tell this student to revise, how you might talk to the student about revising for more depth, more bigger picture type of reflection. And like I said, if you want to talk to a neighbor or something for a couple of minutes and how you might do that, that would be fine. I want to hear from a few of you and how you might talk to the student or how you might suggest revision going forward.
That's not what I want.
To start with, so like, yeah, they have no, well, so they have no, they never specifically, they said the stadium. I might give them half credit for that.
Mine.
Her disability was keeping him schedule.
Not as much grammar for that. I will tell them that this is I can tell
We're previewing it
like the first paragraph, the get better as you go. But yeah, this one, get ours ready for what we're
Let's talk about this for a few minutes. And this is a good example because I think you will see things like this in your, when you ask them to do a reflective response on an event. You see work like this. How might, if you want to do a draft and a revision of a reflective response, how might you talk to this young woman about where we're going next?
It's more of just a play-by-play. There's no reflection to it. It's we did this.
Right.
And then we did this. And that was kind of fun. And then we did that. It's no, I've been on the field before as a band member and seeing that many people cheering for you. I mean, it's an amazing feeling, but
Yeah.
there's no description of that. It's just, oh, this was fun.
I agree. Yeah. And I'm sure she did have this amazing time, but it's in her head, and we don't see that, right? And yeah, I call this an and then narrative. And then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. It's like, okay. Yeah. So what was that?
It is a narrative, not a
Yeah.
reflection.
Right, yeah, exactly. And you're asking them to make meaning, bless you, make meaning of this, right? Put this in a larger context. Now, we can probably all agree there are some interesting doors or portals here. I mean, there's certainly things that I would say, ooh, this is an interesting thought. What do you, go with this? Point out a couple of those. Where do you see something that's interesting here that you could talk to that
I was
student?
talking about this long hallway. Well, what's in the hallway? How did you feel walking down this hallway? Did you feel like a football player walking through the hallway? Was it
Uh-huh.
the same hallway as football players?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Is there anything on the walls that made you nostalgic or anything like that? Just kind of that right there leads in. And a hallway, what's at the end of the hallway? What happens in this big grand opening after you come to the end of the hallway?
Uh-huh. Yeah, good. So, lack of detail and bringing people into a scene? Yeah.
Even just tone, it's written like very informally, and then some guy did this, and I think like, especially with other classes I taught, students tend to, just like how they talk with each other, and so maybe even just kind of like more formally, just even the language that you're kind of using. You know.
Yeah, more agency and feel, yeah, it kind of feels like she's dragged along through some things here, right? Yeah, yes.
And I think, going on that, I usually ask them to try to think of it as a beginning, a middle, and an end. So that there's a process in there that helps their mind. And then with this, just to pull out one or two of those things that they're talking about and focus on those to develop them in the bigger meaning versus trying to do everything.
Great, right? Is to say, yeah, so you could get a piece of writing from a student and say, okay, all right, I get a sense of what you did that day, but in a very broad, general way, right? So why don't we take an event, maybe this part about your dad, that could be interesting, or maybe something else that, yeah, you could build out into. Yeah.
One thing I've said to students, and I took this from a TED Talk, is to always lead with why rather than what you're doing. And I found that helps them because it makes them reflect, not on, because that's what this person's done. They say, this is what I did, this is what I did, this is what I did, this is what I did. There's no why to it.
Yeah.
And really, more than anything, in a reflective paper, you're looking for why.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so students are trained, and it's kind of the fault of so many other things that, that they think this is, well, I am saying something meaningful, right? You'll see this part at the end. We had a fun day. I'll never forget it. Students will never forget anything if you read their writing. Always. I'll never forget this. I'll never forget this. Like now, I don't remember last week. How do you, Well, and so I think she thinks that's getting at the bigger picture there, right? I'll never forget this experience. But really, as you're saying, why? Okay, why, right? Show us that more than saying something that's generic and not. And it's not, again, it's not to criticize this, so you see this all the time from them. And that's where our role becomes so important, because we can talk to them about, I can take away from this piece of writing that you had an interesting day and that it was, exciting in some ways and big for you. So let's get in more about how to show that, what that means in terms of your young 18, 19-year-old life at this point, what this really means. So, we're gonna put you to work here in a minute too on getting more specific with this.
Right, but just to follow up a little bit, this is not a bad thing to do with your students before they write their first reflective response, is to put up even this piece, if you want, just lift it off the PowerPoint, right? And to say, okay, here's what a student tried. If I told you this was missing something, what would be missing, right? And kind of that helps them gives them some context for how to go out. Because this is a very natural response. I probably would have written this response when I was a freshman, right? I know how to tell you what I did. It's really hard to think about why. So kind of showing them what's a pretty typical response even before they start doing it, and then talking about how the response can be made a little deeper, richer, and particularly how can it reach that why question. It's very big. Now, some students will have no clue about how to do that, and that's where, for those students, you need this.
And by the way, why we talk about modeling is that if you were to show that piece of work to students, some of them will say the same things you've said. But for some reason, it gets lost in translation somewhere. And so to get them thinking about those things and get them into that deeper thinking is a really good class activity or homework activity.
So if you have students who are just struggling, even after you've sort of modeled it with them and you can just see in their faces, deer in the headlights. There is a section in the book that you guys have that has the beautiful green cover this year.
You got a new
Just
cover.
kind of talks people step by step through how to write a reflective response. And so not all your students will need that, but for those students who do, or for students who want something to refer to as they're working on the reflective piece, that section that's under the Ole Miss Writing Program is really helpful. It's just sort of step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Okay, so they did their work, now you've got to do your work, which is grading. The worst part for everybody and every writing teacher out there, really difficult. So what we thought we would do is kind of take you through things to think about as you are grading these reflective pieces. Just to kind of, before you sit down with a batch of these papers, a couple of things to think through. First thing you want to think about is your role as a reader. And when I do that, I try to think about what is it that I really wanted my students to learn from this piece, right? So before I even read anybody's, I try to think for myself, what am I looking for, okay? And then the second thing that I always try to think about, and this varies for every teacher, so you just have to decide for yourself, how do you see your role? You know, you can be, your role might be grammar major. You know, I want it to be crystal clear, right? Your role might be coach. I want to help my student understand how to do a little bit better the next time he or she writes something. Your role could be interested reader. I'm interested in a student, I'm interested in the student's experience, I'm interested in seeing how the student expresses that experience. Those are all valid roles for readers, but you need to decide which one you want to play before you jump into it, because that's going to define the way that you respond to the paper. So think about those two things a little bit before you even sit down with a stack of papers that's in front of you. The second thing you want to do is to use a rubric. And Guy just passed out to you, I think, a copy of the rubric. It's also, is it in the book?
It's in the Common Reading Resource Guide.
It's in the Common Reading
Yeah.
Resource Guide. And it was developed by a couple of EDHE teachers a few years ago. And I think a lot of teachers have found it helpful. But it also sort of gets to the heart of what are you looking for in terms of this assignment. Couple of things to notice specifically about the way the rubric is structured. There's a little bit of hierarchy in the rubric. So the first category is conventions and mechanics. You'll see that it's only got 3 letter grades on there, sort of the not so great, the pretty average, and then the above average. And that's kind of the lowest level order that we look at. How are you doing in terms of sentence structure and punctuation and things like that? Second order is really, did they get the information in there that they needed? And that has a little bit broader grade range that adds an A to that category. And then the highest one is the one at the bottom. Is there a lot of good reflection? Right? So the structure is hierarchical. Sorry, lowest at the bottom, highest at the top.
Yeah. It works reverse hierarchical, so.
Yeah. So again, read this before you read the stack of papers, right? And then read the paper, look at the rubric, and that'll kind of help you stay on track with reading each one with some kind of equanimity. You're not always going to be able to do that, right? Because you're going to know the students and you're going to have some preconceived notions, but the rubric will kind of keep pulling you back to the stated norms.
Yeah, and you know, as Karen pointed out, this isn't our rubric. It was actually designed by EDHE instructors years ago. But and people have asked about, well, why is there no A for grammar and mechanics and so forth? And you can kind of play with that the way you want to. But I mean, my advice to anybody would be, no paper should ever earn an A just because it's clean, right? If you're asking them, unless that's the goal, if you're asking them to do meaningful reflection, then reflection should be the primary thing you're looking at. Of course you want clear, clean prose, and it's not to say ignore those things, but I can write you clear sentences, but if they're not asking, they're not accomplishing whatever my goal as a writer is, then it's, that doesn't really matter. That doesn't take primacy. So we're going to let you play with this a little bit. So do you want to pass these out?
Yeah, so what we've got here are a couple of genuine student responses to the reflective response assignment. And how do we want to do this with Guy? We're running out of time.
We're low on time, so we're gonna put you to work and see where we get in a short amount of time. Let's see, what do we have? We've got about 10 minutes, so. There's a response on front and there's a response on the back. They're both separate papers from separate students. And then there's 2 rubrics. You should have a rubric on front and back, so you can technically grade both of those. What we'd like to do, though, what we want to talk to you about a little bit in our remaining time is response, so feedback. Obviously, you don't have enough time, and really, you shouldn't. You shouldn't spend a lot of time making comment after comment. You want to provide focused feedback, especially on a short piece of writing, something the student may take away as beneficial or helpful for the next piece of writing. So we'll get as far as we can. If you want to read those over and then score them on that rubric, and then maybe if you have enough time, maybe write a couple of quick comments that you would provide to that student. We'll share a few of those in the remaining minutes we have. And on this one, by the way, we're treated as a final product. They are final products, so we're treated as such. So on that, like I said, if you want to provide a couple quick pieces of feedback on the rubric, it should be in the mind for future writing, not revision necessarily on this piece.
Yeah, and just to give you a sample of that.
Yeah, there's some specific types of comments on the overhead. Okay. So what do y'all think?
Let's start with the short one.
C.
Sign. Let's see. Which one? Both?
I gave both, and that's being nice.
All right, so we'll start us off. Why?
The orientation block party was just written, very vaguely. No, real detail, no real deep reflection.
Okay. So that would be your comment to the student too, is that they need to be.
Yeah, need to pull a little more out of
reflecting
them.
more and instead of, yeah, so in some ways similar to the Rebel Run story we looked at, it's just like, yeah, sometimes they become these passive spectators, like I was here and all this stuff happened. So, okay, what else? Does that sound about right to everybody?
I would say on the grade wise, I'm about the same. Mine would have worked out to be a C, but I think they actually did better than the other one, like starting to get into reflection, but then like didn't go far enough. There's 2 sentences in the second paragraph. People were making friends with people they would likely not have talked to otherwise. It was very refreshing to see. That for me was a hopeful sign. I just wish they had expanded on that.
Sure, that's a
So-
sentence that jumped out to me in this paper too, is it's like there's something clicking, the students thinking about something there, right? But we don't get much into it. So in terms of feedback then, is that?
I highlighted and wrote expand.
Okay.
So,
Good, right? These are the types of ideas we could say to students. Here's the, when we say reflection, you're opening this door to reflection here. That's what you want to follow through with, right? Okay, good. What else?
Well, just to follow up on that, I think it really is helpful for students if, particularly say this was our first reflection, right? And they get that back and you have highlighted, look, here's where you were just about there, right? Expand here. That's really helpful for them because they have something to sort of zero in on, So that sort of brief, here's the moment, you didn't quite get there, but boy, you can get there next time. That's a really good way to do it.
Yeah, there's this, huge difference. There's studies, there's whole fields of research on the idea of psychological impact that teachers have on students. And it's so interesting to think about the positive and negative because it doesn't even take, it's not like one takes a lot more energy than the other. There's a big difference between writing, you're not saying anything here, versus this is an interesting thought, could you say more about it? Right? Each of those is going to take you 10 seconds to write, but one of them could have a big psychological impact in saying, that student thinking, oh, I was onto something, I just didn't follow through, versus I'm useless, right? So, yeah. Other comments or feedback you can provide to the
I
students?
felt like I was reading the same sentence in five different ways. And I feel like a lot of times students are just trying to do the bare minimum to get it over with and done.
Yeah.
While you need to teach them this is not just about the assignment, it's about your experience and your journey. Because I feel like if you just treat it as just simply an assignment, they're going to be like, all right, I'm just going to do the bare minimum, get it done, get my A, and move on.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of saying earlier, is that in a lot of ways, students feel like, again, I generalize some, you'll have some strong students who really see the meaning, but you'll get a lot of students who feel like, I'm supposed to just turn something in that this
Get the
teacher
bare
wants to
minimum,
see it,
right.
and jump through this hoop. And some of them will have troubles being honest, when in reality, this is the kind of thing where some honesty would be really great, just kind of see what really happened, what did you experience at this, versus just what they think you may want to hear over and over again.
Well, I think the other problem too is some students may not be that challenged enough to really reflect. So a lot of them are just like, I don't know, this was just fun, and I guess we need to challenge them to think that because everyone's going to have different levels of reflecting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you can push them to, one of the things I use with students is just, a word like fun. Well, what does fun mean, right? It might mean, it's probably going to mean something completely different to me than it is to someone else. So, show what that means, right? And what that means to you. Absolutely.
One thing I noticed is she said, we're kind of, but this, I felt more confident. This is an effect. She is describing how this experience influenced her feeling of confidence. Then she says, we're all here because. That answers the why. We love Ole Miss. And that that's a reflection. To me, there's more, it may not be in big, serious sounding words, but she's bearing her soul here in a couple of these sentences. It's not a great piece of reflective writing, but she does get there in some places, like he said.
Yeah, right. I think that there's these ideas that would be really interesting to know more about. It's the kind of thing too where, I like that the whole phrase "because we love Ole Miss," right? One of the ways you can talk to a student about that is, well, why? How someone outside? How would you explain that to them, right? Because I think too often becomes insular, where we think, oh, okay, well, I know what that means, but would any reader know what that means, right?
But I think that's a really good thing to look for, those words that move beyond the plot and move into sort of the feelings and the aspirations of the student. And I think you're absolutely right. Building confidence is part of what we want to do in college, right? And it's got to be grounded in something real. It should be about things that you have strength in. But you're right, for her to start thinking through, where do I feel confident? What makes me feel confident? How do I continue to grow in that way? That's the harder reflection, to be honest with you. And you just kind of have to suss it out for them a little bit, right? You kind of have to point out to them those kind of words, those kind of lines, where you say, this is where you're starting to get to it. Keep going, keep going.
Yeah, I think if you look at that first, go ahead.
And I think part of what I have to know if I'm grading this is that I see two very different lengths, or at least it appears on here. Fonts can mess that up. So what was the word limit on here, and how much is
Well,
there? Because this is what I'm coming from. What I can expect from a student is going to depend on how much I've given them to develop.
Right, yeah.
So, I've got to keep that in my mind when I'm looking at it. You can ramble and not really say anything.
Sure.
Or you can be very concise and really say a lot.
Absolutely, yeah, I could meet a word count all day.
The longer one, I found some real meat there. I think I could help that student take a few of those parts, because if that person did find some meaning from this, there's some new things that they learned, that he learned or she learned, whatever it is, that talked about in there, that could be a real difference in regards to diversity and how they see the world. And, like when he starts talking about traveling, if you could then go there and say, okay, so when you travel, how might you see things differently?
Absolutely, right? Yeah.
So you've got some real, I think, need in there to work with to help guide the students.
Well, and the students, it certainly needs something, but there's this sophisticated idea, or the beginnings of a sophisticated idea about understanding what memorials mean in this first one too, right? Yeah, in terms of what could be there's definitely some interesting work there. Yeah, and that's my fault. I should have set up front. These are just, we're actually not even teachers of EDHE, so we pull from lists of samples we get, and so usually Dewey will send us some papers and so forth. So I think for the most part, though, they're, these are fairly short. What's the standard length you assign there, Dewey?
250 word minimum.
250 word, yeah, kind of minimum kind of thing too. So, but I think that harkens back to what Karen was saying earlier, right? In the terms of the expectations of what you want to do, that first reflection can be so important, because if you say, whatever, 250 word minimum, and then you get something that isn't going anywhere, you can talk to that student and say, here's the expectations for future writings, and that's a short space, so you need to get to something meaningful right away. Or, like with this particular student, maybe this is a great idea. Why don't you write a little bit about how that might influence your views of travel going forward, too. So.
One of the challenges I think we have is we want to encourage the student to write. And so I know I'm guilty of this, and it causes me problems down the road, is I will probably tend to assess the first submission, the first writing, whether it's a journal or a reflective response, probably a little more liberally than I do down the road. And when you have to make that break from not so strict adherence to the rubric to a more realistic interpretation of the rubric, they don't understand. They said, I don't understand. I had this on the first paper, and I thought I did better on this one. And that's a really hard balance, because you don't want to pour cold water on, because some of the, the first submissions Hell, they're horrible.
Confident, yeah. And what Dewey's talking about is extremely common, and he's right, and I think there's a lot of teachers who do that because you don't want to break confidence, you don't want to discourage them, anything like that. And I'll give you all one quick suggestion, I know we're out of time. One quick suggestion for that, it might take a little bit more time, but I think you might see a payoff from this, is to hand back the first submission ungraded with feedback on it. So say, here's where you could do, you know, or as you said, right, here's this great idea about travel. Once you develop that, rewrite it, and then you could grade a second one, and that would allow you to start that communicative process with the student, but not have it focused on a grade, right? In other words, they start to see, oh, I really need to get deeper into my reflections and so forth. Now, like I said, it might be a little bit of extra work, not a ton, but a little bit of extra work. It might not be for everybody, but it is an idea. And I think we're out of time. We're going to join you again in the next session for a cameo. But we're going to turn it over to Patrick to set up that stuff. So thank you all. And this is available for everyone.